Imagine getting cucked by a SoundCloud rapper, then having to help raise the bastard. Now imagine if the creator of the show drew fan art of Greg and Pearl hooking up. It's been a very fun week for me.
It's hideous, but beautiful in an ugly way, but mostly hideous.
Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Chorus, you've never talked about a single ship from Steven Universe. Are you seriously gonna start talking about the queer pioneer of children's cartoons with a straight ship? Which, first off, that's offensive. We do not tolerate bi erasure. Greg didn't gobble 16 truckers behind a Denny's to get labeled a straight man. Second, none of what I just said is true, except Greg being queer. His sexuality, be fluid, just like these facts, cause today we are talking about a cracked ship, which means we get to reject reality and substitute our own, as Rebecca Sugar drew Greg and Pearl hooking up, and people are losing their minds over it, while others are not surprised.
Oh, my sweet summer child, what do you know about fear?
Truly, this made my week, as I've never not loved rubbernecking a non-issue. This ain't canon, and while its source gave it extra attention, that doesn't mean it's anything special. So, in the interest of comedy and sacrilege, today we're gonna talk about Greg x Pearl. Who they are, the messy backstory that should have put Pearl on the news, answer the question of can you make a whole meal out of a dead woman's leftovers? Also, where did this art even come from? And is its existence actually a problem? The answers will only semi-surprise you. I'm Sarcastic Chorus. Let's talk ship.
It's time to work the old universe charm.
No!
So for those not in the know, Steven Universe is about the child Protective Services couldn't find. Steven has 99 problems and his mother is behind all of them. And if she's not, Gran has been up to her old tricks again. This boy was fucked by life, inheriting his mother's team and her baggage. His mom's friends dumped so much trauma on him Steven should have been declared a protected area by age 10. Was bad enough he was born bedazzled, but now he's got to deal with monsters that are actually victims, the emotions of every rock in the cosmos, and the whining of some bum who sells donuts. A normal person would shatter under all this pressure, but Steven, by some miracle, was able to manage till his teens.
I'm a monster!
Crazy what perspective, distance, and a 9 to 5 will do to your mental state. All this to say Steven is going through it, and given that he was raised by 3 space rocks and a van lifer, he's shockingly well adjusted, especially when one of the rocks has beef with his dad.
What makes you so sure?
You stole my wife! She chose me.
This is where the actual crack ship comes in, and for those who don't know the diff between crack and regular ships, crack refers to a ship that is highly unlikely to happen, aka you'd have to be smoking crack to think this would be possible. With the pairing of your ex's situationship Pearl and the last boyfriend Greg fitting perfectly into this cracked category. Or does it?
Hold on.
So just get my crazy out of the way early, this ship, it was never gonna happen. But the tags tell a different story. Enemies to lovers, shared grief over a woman they lost, the full spectrum of opposites attract, then spice everything up with the sheer taboo of these two ending up together and the horror of having a child call his aunt stepmom. Yeah, I can see why this would attract attention. It was never gonna happen cause lesbian, and sadly not self-respect, as early Pearl didn't have any.
I'm just a pearl.
She gets better, thank God, but while the show proper makes a very strong case for why this was both impossible and not the best decision for either of them, in a vacuum, which in this case is just code for our heads, it's easy to see why certain wires might cross and envision what could have been. If you already like the Doom Yuri, doomed old man dad is pretty much right up there. The tags, spicy, the characters, great, making for a tantalizing ship. Though to properly explain who these yahoos are, I'm gonna have to go into actual specifics. So spoilers for those who haven't finished the actual show. This is your warning, as I'm about to do a joke that's gonna spoil most of this thing. Ready, steady, go. Now let's start with Pearl, since this is another relationship she had to hard carry. Pearl was a mail order servant sworn to Pink Diamond, after her last one got taken away by Mummy Dearest. Pink's family is terrible, and Pearls are barely considered people, but still, these two got along swimmingly. The young ingenues would later go on to do the taller gem's wish of committing colonialism, only for Rose to touch grass once and immediately realize her home life is shit, deciding that she wanted to do this instead, with Pearl tagging along and pining to be this.
Isn't that ridiculous? Tell me to stop. Please don't ever stop.
Now, the show's creator has described Pearl and Pink's relationship as what if Alfred was in love with Batman, which is one hell of a mental image. But to summarize the summary, since Rose x Pearl is its own video, Pink tries to tell her family, let's not do a crime against humanity, only for them to respond, what the hell's humanity, and to ignore her completely. Designed to say fuck the system, Pink turned her Rose Quartz alias into a revolutionary, gathering her allies, imprisoning her ally, faking her own death, with the other diamond saying GG and fantasy nuking the planet. If you got hit, you turned feral, with only the core crystal gems and the one in the basement staying sane. But they survived. And through all of it, Pearl carried Rose's secrets, supported her decisions, risked life and gem, devoted her entire being to her love. Mind, body, soul. Rose is tongue deep in a human, isn't she?
So I can fuck whoever I want. Of course. Of course. As long as you come home to me. Of course.
Because boundaries are a literal foreign concept to the aliens, Pearl fought an intergalactic war, redefined what it means to be a Pearl, just to end up in a 5,000-year situationship with a non-monogamous messiah. Pearl liked Rose, Rose liked options, so they compromised and Rose did whoever she wanted. Because if one thing's true about diamonds, it's that they collect bodies. Meanwhile, Pearl is at home, gaslighting herself into saying everything's fine. Rose loves her, those humans mean nothing.
Are you all right?
Rose and Pearl are basically an example of a loving but very flawed relationship. No one meant ill, but Pearl was still left sickened with a crippling amount of her self-worth being tied to Rose, feeling like her life meant nothing in comparison to Rose's everything. One could call Pearl codependent, and they'd be right. So imagine spending centuries accepting but probably not loving the fact that Rose was dating humans on and off, only to watch her get serious with a dude named Greg.
Okay.
Yup, this is where Greg enters the chat, a wannabe rock star whose only claim to fame is a jingle and landing an actual queen. Greg was just a guy, but Pink took a fancy to him, and unlike all of her other conquests, this one stuck around, infuriating the other woman who would have flipped tables if her OCD would allow it. If she could vomit, she would. And not helping matters is that he already won over the rest of the friend group, so Pearl couldn't even pretend she wasn't his #1 hater. Taking shots like it's back to school day, Pearl would fail to do any real damage as her big, beautiful woman would leave her for a short king. Open relationships are all fun and games, till unspoken rules turn out to be assumptions. Rose went poly, Greg's fighting for this to happen, and Pearl is just pissed. As who doesn't hate a love triangle? Especially when you're not clearly endgame. Rose did love Pearl romantically, but it's hard to say if they ever actually talked about what they wanted in this relationship. Instead, it feels a wee bit more like they just made it up as they go. Rose didn't know what real human love was till Greg demanded she start treating him like a person instead of a curiosity. This made being with Greg a new experience. It made him challenging. So she decided to challenge everyone else by dying.
You just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So Rose got knocked up by a future Homer Simpson lookalike, died becoming part of her son, who would spend the next decade catching her mother's strays. Pearl didn't handle it well, like kidnap and nearly maim the baby levels of bad. Then, because Pearl is allergic to catching breaks, she's now trapped taking care of Rose's rugrat.
Once upon a time, a woman got fucked.
Now, honestly, nothing I'll say this video will ever be funnier than this one tweet about this whole situation. Pearl was always misunderstood because if my 10-foot-tall, bipolar, bisexual, bipedal, pink-haired goddess situationship left me to have a baby with a SoundCloud rapper, I'd be on the news. This is perfect. And yeah, things were never gonna be easy for Pearl and Greg after this. By some miracle, they managed to land on polite at the start of the series, but you can't really blame Pearl for being unable to see Greg without then thinking about all the things she's lost since he came into her life. Though we do have the question of how much of that supposed resentment is actually about Greg, and how much of his redirected anger she can't bring herself to feel towards Rose. So here the two are, bound by a shared grief neither of them were prepared to deal with, a child they now have to basically co-parent, and yeah, no shit were people gonna ship them.
Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
Truly, when you lay it all out, while not the thing that the show was going for, the seeds were there and fans would have a field day with them. Greg and Pearl are in this weird but compelling situation where they are arguably the two most affected by Rose's death. There's a near indescribable knot of grief, guilt, and love binding them together. Greg, by the miracle of not being manufactured and having a life outside of Rose, is better equipped to live without her, while Pearl is in uncharted waters having to finally find an identity outside of her pink oyster. While it's not his fault, Pearl has a very understandable reason to have beef with Greg. You could easily see a world where she hates him more than she does, just like you could see a world where Greg just wants to help. As he gets it. He knows what Pearl is going through as he's going through it too. You can call Greg X Pearl many things, but boring isn't one of them. The homophobic isn't out of the question. This ship, it's cracked, but it does have that one thing that puts it leagues above even the more canon ships. Intrigue. People aren't gonna go to bat for mid, though sometimes they do. The best gift a story can give fans is to create an interesting situation, something with layers and conflict that gets people invested in seeing how these events will play out. If people can have radically different interpretations and ideas of how this could end, with all of those things feeling valid, that's amazing, that is perfect, that is so good for fan discussion. And it's why this ship has such a good hook to it. Greg was always willing to bury the hatchet. He assumes Pearl must hate him for what happened, which has some truth to it, but it's tied more to Pearl's soul-crushing grief than true anger. This creates a natural layup for the fanfic, to try and help these two lost souls help each other. You can exaggerate the beef, lean into the tragedy, make it as horny or sincere as you want, and it would all be fun. You can milk this thing for all it's worth, and honestly, it would be very entertaining. Personally, I love Pearl and Greg's friendship. Mr. Greg is one of my favorite episodes, as it has the two reconcile and talk about their shared love of Rose, and throw a little bit of shade.
Well, you know Rose. She always did what she wanted.
Never shipped them, but this being a thing doesn't surprise me. In story, it would have been a little weird to have Pearl's arc of self-discovery and learning to define herself apart from Rose to end with her dating Rose's ex. It can work, but some people would riot. Love it, hate it, you can't deny that there isn't meat on this bone. Also, the sad truth is that Greg is functionally the easiest character to ship Pearl with for like 4 seasons. Yeah, Pearl gets that rebound, but of the options, Greg is just kind of sitting there and he's easy. You could write opposites attract with Amethyst, but since Amethyst acts as Steven's sister while Pearl acts like his mother, that's a wrinkle people have to deal with, and it throws off the vibes. Meanwhile, Garnet is in love with herself, and we had a whole bunch of drama about that. Steven is an actual child, so if you're looking to ship Pearl with anybody that isn't Rose, Greg weirdly fits the bill. Till Bismuth decided to get her revenge in the funniest way possible.
Pearl? Bismuth, you're here for Pearl?
You're goddamn right.
If you're wondering why so many people aren't surprised, it's because this ship, it isn't new. Also, I do want it to be known that while people joke about Greg having Riz, Pearl canonically has gotten way more digits. Also, speaking of canon, Greg does move in with Pearl at the end of the series. Do with that out of context information as you will. But ultimately, while this shit was never gonna happen in the main show, not gonna lie though, I kinda like it just because it'd be nice to not have the boy help a gem work through an issue for a change. Instead, it'd be the daddy.
He looks just like Greg. That's good. He used to be super hot.
I can see why this would live rent-free in some people's heads. The only shocking thing about this fan art of Greg and Pearl kissing before what looks like raw dogging is that it came from Rebecca Sugar. That's actually not that shocking if you're familiar with their game. Yeah, that's right. That's the rat from Ratatouille helping his buddy out in bed. I'd show you more, but this video would get demonetized like the rest of Sugar's personal work that is leaked online.
There's so much porn!
This shit ain't canon, and every artist you've ever met probably has done horny things with their characters at some point or another. So this is truly a non-issue. The fact that this allegedly leaked online through a friend's Patreon is the only noteworthy thing here. Though, to entertain that one elephant in the room, yeah, Pearl's not into men, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, this ship is deader than Cable in canon. However, in fanon, reality is optional, so one could technically ship queer characters with people outside of their demo. Now I get why this idea can be touchy. Years of queer fans needing to create their own spaces due to a lack of canon real estate, historic pushbacks against said fan works, only for major LGBT characters to finally start breaking into the mainstream, then this sudden rep getting shipped with Hunter can come off like it's erasing an essential part of the character's identity. Personally though, I don't really care.
Move this man!
See, for me, it's an issue of scale. I don't really believe any fan work will ever eclipse the relevance of the original text. Conversations around a show can distort public discourse or perception of a series. You've had to see a queer to straight ship become so popular that it's tricked non-viewers en masse that it was canon. Those definitely work the other way. Marcel and Farron, they aren't actually together, and I was shocked when I found this out. But this one didn't come out of nowhere. This to me speaks how, typically outside of an organized hate campaign, a piece of media's impact will rarely have its influence outpaced by fan derivatives, which is why I tend to think shipping characters with those that don't fit their canon sexuality isn't really worth getting worked up over. Amity X Hunter exists, but no amount of likes are ever gonna match the amount of times people have replayed the Grom dance sequence. Just like how no amount of Garnet X anyone else fan art is gonna ever take away Stronger Than You, though Undertale came pretty damn close.
Let's go, dirty brother killer.
Shipping by its very nature breaks the established canon to do its own thing, and explore a different idea and feeling. In this one case, drama. So personally, I think it's far better to use our time and energy talking about official productions that reach a wider audience and have a far greater impact on public perception. Most fans won't ever know this fan art exists or that it was made by the show's creator, while something like the Netflix Dorian Gray adaptation in the works is up to some actual chicanery, as the homoerotic subtext of Dory and Basil's relationship is now apparently being replaced with them being siblings. And mind you, Oscar Wilde was put on trial for his sexuality and this book was used as evidence. This makes the choice of potentially erasing this rep to a wide audience feel just incredibly tone deaf. But Pearl X Greg, it's fine. It's cracked. People know it's cracked, and nobody should be getting annoyed at Rebecca Sugar for it. There's a great fanfic here, but it's gonna stay a fanfic, and it's probably always gonna stay that way. And I, for one, am thankful, as I will take this discourse over Pearl X Rick any day of the week. This thing was huge for a couple months. Personally, I blame the fact that all the people that watched Steven Universe as kids finally learned how to draw. So they were just right time, right place. Also, if you guys haven't seen Interview with the Vampire yet, go do it. The funniest way to watch is just imagine it's a fanfic of Pearl, Rose, and Greg's relationship, though the characters do flip around a lot.
The 10 hours I spent with that boy more fascinating than decades with you.